Here we are with another 3-player matchup in Empires of Aether, featuring a couple of some of the original players that have yet to make an appearance on the virtual version of the game. We've got Michael, just goes by Michael, David, aka the Biggest Yeet, squaring off against Blue Shadow, a fan favorite, seeking out his second published win on YouTube. Can he overcome a couple of the original minds in this game? Minds that have contributed greatly to the current iteration of the game. Minds that have contributed to many of the balancing changes, many of the additional mechanisms, landmarks. They've contributed a lot of the ideas here. Can he beat that? I don't know. But we have the board here right in front of us, and it's a pretty balanced board. I don't see any corner that's at a huge disadvantage here. And so we go with our rolls, and we've got Justin with the low roll, so he will pick his nations last. We've got Michael with the high roll. He will pick his first. And David, of course, going in the middle. And based on our conversation, at the beginning, once we actually met with one another, we kind of gave them the lowdown, how things have looked as of late. And we get rid of Arcane. Based on our conversations, we're kind of scared of Arcane. I think it's been banned ever since it's been made. I don't think we have a published video of Arcane yet. Justin also frustrated from the last game, squaring off against Xenares, where Air was absolutely dominant on the 3-player iteration of this game, which, of course, is something to, look at moving forward. We mentioned that Air might need some tuning in that 3-player version, but either way, Air gets taken out, and David actually bans Earth here. So Justin, we can expect that Justin wants to play Blood, but he gets to pick last, which is unfortunate because it is Michael who takes Blood with the first pick after those bans go into play and goes into the top right corner, assessing his options here, right? Nothing wrong with it. I think he's valuing the food, quite a bit. Is it the most balanced corner? It's not bad. It's not bad at all. I think this is the most balanced corner. I think this is probably the optimal first pick choice here, but nothing wrong here. Nothing wrong whatsoever. David then goes for Water, which when he was playing, Water was amongst the weakest, but since the inclusion of these star tiles, Water has been super dominant. In fact, all of the original 4 nations have been amongst the most dominant to be played in here. The one change we made to Water right away was instead of having 3 river tiles, which they have in the normal 4-player version of the map, which is a little bit bigger, Water is only going to have 2 river tiles coming from their capital tile here, because smaller map mobility, a little too much of an advantage there. So Water's going to end up there, and then Justin, Stan Blue Shadow, I like it, accepts the challenge of trying to make Ice great. Ice has really, really struggled. It is not the nation that it doesn't have 0 wins like Poison. Poison still has 0 published wins, but Ice only has 1 or 2 published wins. Not that good. But they haven't really been tested out since the last changes to the game. These star tiles are going to be quite interesting. These new, more accessible boss tiles could be interesting for Ice to get involved here. And so let's see how things shook out. This is a game that features the first virtual, published version of the Aether tile coming into play. That's right, this game does make it all the way to turn 10. And I will say there was a point in this game in which I thought that any of the 3 players could win. This is one of the most exciting games that I have ever had the privilege to witness, to cast, and I hope you guys enjoy that as well. So we're looking at our abilities here in just a second. Once we take a look at those, we'll get your picks on who you think is going to win. So join me as we take a look at their abilities. Taking a look at the abilities taken here by our players, going, of course, in the reverse order in which the elements were picked. So we're starting off with Justin, who is going to take his turn first with the Ice Nation. Ice is one of those very situational elements that you want to pick, and so I really like the fact that Justin was picking last, which is why he chose Ice, because if you give the opponent the opportunity to pick Magma or Fire, which has the inherent ability, the capability of melting your Blizzard tiles away, you're kind of screwed right from the get-go. You're kind of screwed at Champ Select, as a lot of people would say in a lot of different games. So I really, really like Justin's mindset there. They get an extra Tier 1 ability in the form of Iceberg, which, admittedly, it was my very first ability created for Ice. That being said, the reason why it is a guaranteed ability for them, they don't have to actually choose it, is because it really hasn't shown itself to be that effective yet. I've seen it used in a really cool way one time out of the few times it's been used, but it's kind of gimmicky. So admittedly, it's certainly not their best feature. When I'm looking at, the latest iteration of the game with star tiles and all that, I see Ice winning in the form of not militaristically. I see them winning by taking star tiles, turning them into blizzard tiles, which essentially makes them uncapturable by the enemy. And then just hoarding resources and waiting for that 50-50 mark. So let's see what Justin chooses to pursue here. So Iceberg, there's nothing to comment on here. You always have Iceberg. I like his other three choices here. Frigid is really, really good at buying yourself time to maybe give yourself enough time to, make something into a blizzard, hoard an extra turn of resources so that you can accelerate to tier 2, something like that. But all the other choices are really, really good. Seal hunting is an opportunity to pop to, potentially an early tier 3, early tier 2, or maybe even get to that 50-50 point. So I think his abilities taken here were really, really solid. I don't have any arguments on any of those. And then his tier 2 cards, couple other, rather situational cards, but these are absolutely the best set of tier 2 cards you can take. You're always taking Attack of the Snowns. You're always taking Blubber Rations. And then Polar Bears, even though your soldiers are a lot cheaper, it's kind of hard to argue with 2 free armies, which even gives them the potential to capitalize upon the new win condition, which is to own 10 armies simultaneously, which is kind of interesting as well. But it's really, really good tier 2 aggression. And then tier 3, you're always taking Winter Storm on the move. That is kind of their Exodia card at the end. That is their way that they eliminate these strong stalwart nations that have defenses that Ice normally would have no chance of getting through. Then in addition to that, just good tier 3 cards. Have we seen these tier 3 cards been utilized in effective ways? Not so much. It's really they're just waiting to utilize this Winter Storm on the move. That is their crushing blow so that they can gain an advantage. But like I said, Ice is not looking to kill their opponent. At least that's my interpretation of Ice. I'm looking for those star tiles, and I'm looking to, hoard resources and win the game. So blizzards are a way of forcing your opponent into choke points and make contentious tiles inaccessible by your opponents. That's the key to them. Then we go to David in Water. Water's got, lots of really, really good economy boosting cards in tier 1. Flood is a really, really good defensive card because they're not the best tier 1. They're absolutely not the best tier 1. But then their other 2 tier 1s that he took were eco cards, which I think is a great choice. And he's got, a couple lakes. He's got a field adjacent to his capital tile. So these are going to be really, really solid. His economy is going to be popping. Water is really, really good at accessing food. And then tier 2, flipping it on your opponent and by crushing them with a ton of soldiers. Calling the Navy, absolutely always taking it. If you'll notice that David's river was on the border. It was ocean adjacent, which is very, very strategic. I really like that move. And so he took in Calling the Navy, absolutely critical. You can usually get yourself at least 2 free armies from that, in the mid stage of the game. But you can also, if you hold off long enough, you can get 3 or 4 free armies from that. And what does that do? That allows Water to be really, really good at getting this own 10 armies win condition. So let's see if he can do that in this game. Then I really love the when did that river get longer? He put that river right up against that Cerberus. So if Blood is posing for that boss tile on the northern point of the map, David can just eliminate it. David can get rid of that boss tile and remove it as a potential win condition. So I really, really like that move. And then Fertile Footing, it is so hard to say no to this card. It's another economy boost. Water, I don't think that they're trying to kill their opponents either. I think, honestly, that they're going for that 50-50 resource count for their win condition in addition to owning 10 armies with the current iteration of the game. That's my interpretation of Water. That's how I personally would play it. Of course, every game is completely situational. If opportunities present themselves for you to crush your opponent, you're going to take it, right? But based on the abilities that we currently have in the game, that's how I would win with Water, is to go with the 50-50 and to own 10 armies. And then tier 3, once again, another card that boosts your economy. We're converting a desert into an oasis. If I get my general onto my oasis, I'm generating 20 of one resource and 10 of the other. That's pretty easy to get to 50 and 50. And that's pretty easy to get to your army count as well. And then I really love this. You're sabotaging your own economy temporarily to permanently sabotage your opponent's economy. Really, really powerful card. And then this is a good defensive card to buy yourself some time. Because, like I said, Water, you're not going aggressive. You can, but you probably shouldn't be. You're not going aggressive. And so if someone is going aggressive on you and you are not going to win that long-term battle, this is going to buy you some time. Very, very solid. The reason why I put this card out to the side is I think he probably should have gone for this. In a 3-player map, it's smaller. which is why if I could get the river to extend across, if I can get the river to extend a few more tiles, then I can traverse the entire map in one turn. And that is a powerful ability to ignore. So I probably would have gotten rid of this one or this one and substituted with the Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls. But we'll see if that ends up being a potential event for him to have instigated in his game plan anyway. So if it wasn't in his plan, then yeah, not going to take it. But he obviously didn't take it in this game. And in Blood, there's no choices here. The only thing that has been changed is the Channeling Dracula Tier 3 ability, which only becomes active once you've sacrificed 20 soldiers. And I know it doesn't say it here. It has been changed so your general can only move 2 tiles per turn. That 3-tile movement was insanely powerful. They have a lot of insanely powerful abilities, and admittedly, I think that more of them are going to be subject to change here in the next few times that Blood has been played. But that was the most egregious of their plays, I think, in the last couple playthroughs that I've had, and so that was the only change that has been exhibited here. But they still only have the same set of abilities to pick from, so there's no choices here. So let's see how Michael adapts to this new element. This is the first time this element has been put into the game since he's played. So let's see what he does with the new nation. Let's jump into the action, ladies and gentlemen. But before you do that, if you're watching this video on our YouTube channel, please, please, please throw down in the comments who you currently have winning. Is it Blue Shadow? The Ice player? Admittedly a weaker nation? At least when I say that, I mean they don't have as many wins as other elements. But Blue Shadow's got the most experience with the current iteration of the game. Or will it be David? Or Michael? 2 of the first minds to ever experience of this game making a comeback to the land of Aether. Who do you got? Blood? Water? Ice. A matchup of, I think, 3 fairly turtley nations. Of the most aggressive, I would definitely put Ice in the most aggressive category. Maybe Water. But Blood, you are turtling, right, baby? You're trying to make that general into an absolute raid boss. I have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, yeah, I do. I was there when they played it. But it was a spicy game. Like I said, there was a point in the game where I thought any player could win. Let's get into the action. Let's get into the action, kicking it off with Justin as the Ice player. Here we see he's already drawn his first advantage card. It is one of the new ones. Very excited to see that Bull by the Horns. Really hoping this card gets played. Incredibly powerful. We just added 10 to 12 new advantage cards here, so I'm really excited to see this card get played. Let's see how Justin utilizes it. I don't think Ice is normally a nation that can go for multiple boss tiles, but advantage cards like this make it possible. Let's see. Shuffling that deck, guaranteeing that we're getting that, some of the new cards in there, getting a good fair shuffle in there. And looking at these tiles here, looking likely for Ice to open up with a mountain field, Water to open up with a lake mountain, and Blood to probably open up with a field mountain. But of course, announced cards can make all the difference. Ice is doing just that, going with a barracks on their capital, opening up with the field and the mountain. And we heavily criticized Justin's early game movements in the last game, if you guys paid attention to that one on our YouTube channel. But even subtle decisions like this, moving the general to the middle point of the map, that is vastly improved upon Justin's performance from last game. I don't think he would have done that last game. It seemed like he was actively avoiding the middle of the map. And so moving your more powerful unit, your general, to the middle of the map is incredibly important. All right, we see Water is going to open up with that mountain and that lake. Let's take a look at what his advantage card was. Gets the Setting the Example advantage card. Not the best card here, right? But could help in the early game. Who knows? Water does open up with the lake and the mountain, which is absolutely the best move for them. Water is pretty cool in their first turn, or first couple of turns, in that they'll always have access to really, really cheap river tiles. They cost 3 food apiece, but they're generating 2 food a turn, but you don't have the capability of putting any resource building on them. But Water Nation's passive is that if you move into the river, you can end on any river tile, so he can move 2 tiles in any turn. Pretty impactful. We get the To the Front advantage card for Blood here. Purchasing an army for one of your barracks for a discounted rate can be pretty huge for Blood because they've got that universal donor card at their disposal. So for a discounted rate, they can sacrifice that army to get 3 resource buildings on 1 tile. That's a lot of potential there. But with those cards, yeah, it's pretty obvious that everyone's going to go with that 10-10 start here, opening up with a building material giving tile and a food giving tile in the mountain and the field. So pretty standard here. And then we're going to open up with our first weather event here. An unfortunate first weather event, we get Oops. Each player gets to, or has to discard one advantage card, which means all three of our players are discarding the one advantage card that they drew this turn. Unfortunate, which means yet again, the Bull by the Horns, that really powerful advantage card, is getting tossed. I think this happened last game as well. Unfortunate. I really want to see that advantage card played, and I really want to see how it is utilized. Ice gets the possible aid announce card. He rolls a dice. If it's an even number, he gets 2 soldiers at his capital. That is massive for the early game. Absolutely massive for the early game. And he did get it. I think we missed the roll here, but he has 2 more soldiers on the board. He moves 1 to his iceberg tile, and he moves 1 to the forest. So let's see what he does with these iceberg in these early turns. Is he going to pose for it to be aggressive? I personally don't think you should ever do that with the iceberg. I think it is a late game thing. And like I said, it's gimmicky, and I think it's late game gimmicky. You want to wait so that you can move and then attack with it, utilizing that tier 3 passive iceberg warfare. I do not think it has a place in the early game. But that's just me, the creator, the developer. What do I know? So we go to water here. After ice just purchases 1 additional tile, water gets the draft to war advantage card, which is really only relevant in tier 1. Now remember that tier 2, every nation gets the capability of purchasing 5 soldiers from a barracks per turn. So if he's going to use it, he wants to use it tier 1. But water can get to tier 2 very quickly. I like what water's doing. David has a lot of experience of seeing water lose in the early game. Right? Back, many changes ago in Empires of Aether, water was pretty weak. Aggressive nations could beat it very quickly before water had the chance to pop off in the mid-game. That being said, if water gets to go to the mid-game, they were incredibly powerful. And where a lot of people would go wrong is they would heavily invest in food and not invest in building materials. So I like David's positioning. He's not moving towards the river, taking advantage of that just yet, because he knows he's always going to be able to do that. Move to the middle of the map, take that star tile, and take something else that gives me building materials. Definitely the right move here. The advantage card he gets is the Boss Containment Device advantage card. Sorry, it's hanging off your screen just a little bit. So notice the bosses that are involved on this map. We've got Felnir and the Hydra. The other one doesn't actually involve the boss in the fight, but if someone ever takes the Hydra or Felnir, he can eliminate it from the battle, which could be hugely impactful. Don't see it being useful in the next few turns, but could be hugely impactful later in the game. A very situational advantage card, but I've seen it turn the tides of entire games before. So Blood's sitting at 5 and 5, and he's going to spend 3 of those building materials on a resource building on the field. And he's going to train a soldier from his barracks and move to another field. I don't like this move already from turn 2. He's not purchasing more land, which is a mistake that we've seen many players make on this channel already in just the first few rounds that have been published, and yet people are still doing it. You want to buy new land. He's got this lake right here that's sitting right in front of him, not to mention the fact that it's a star tile. You've got enough resources to take it, and Blood's passive is every 3rd tile that you purchase gets a free castle put on it. He could get a free castle put onto his lake. I don't see how you don't make that move there. But he doesn't do it. Whatever. So what he also does is he sacrifices the only 2 soldiers that he has to activate the first application of his Universal Donor to get an extra resource building on that field, which, how strange is this move? He purchases 2 soldiers to immediately sacrifice them. He moved them to 2 separate tiles, and then he's not even going to give them the chance to buy those tiles. A super peculiar turn 2 move that I think will bite him later on. Weather is forest fires. Forests aren't producing building materials, which the only one that's affected by that currently is ice. They're just going to miss out on 1 building material this turn, so no big deal from the weather here. Our updated resources, Justin at 8 and 8, the biggest yeet at 10 and 7, and Michael Blood heavily investing in his food, that much is evident, 11 and 7. Moves that iceberg a little bit north, draws the Mountain Battalion advantage card when a mountain tile you own is attacked. Add 3 soldiers to the battle. Not seeing too much potential for that happening, especially because the only mountain that would ever be in contention is over here. If Blood or Water is making it over here, they could just as likely, attack other tiles. So I'm not sure if that card is ever going to be useful for him here. I see cards like that being especially useful if they end up being the star tiles on the map. So Ice taking advantage of their passive. Every 4th building is free, which is pretty cool. So he's built this barracks. He built a couple resource buildings. So that 3rd resource building is going to be a free one for him. So lots of benefits there. Lots of buffing his economy there. Didn't buy any new land. Nope, he buys that lake because he heavily invested his building materials. Pretty good there. And still has enough food in order to acquire that lake. So he does still acquire land. So huge difference between Michael's turn 2 and Justin's turn 3. Justin is boosting his economy and also still acquiring land. Water gets basically the same advantage card that they drew in first turn. Add +3 to your general's dice roll for this battle, which is actually just a weaker version of the card that he drew in the first turn. Unfortunate luck there. Let's see if he gets to hold on to this one in his hand over the next couple of turns. Water purchases a couple of resource buildings, right? One on the mountain, one on the lake. Activates his Fertile Crescent Tier 1 ability, which gives him an extra resource building on that lake. So this lake alone is producing him 9 food a turn. Very massive. Got a lot of food left over. He's sitting at 10 and 1 currently. Trains 3 soldiers and goes ahead and spreads them out. Or just 2 soldiers, actually. Blood with a lot of food here. Builds another barracks on that mountain tile that he owns. So notice he's heavily invested in food, but he only owns that mountain tile. Oh, never mind. Events are changing because he drew an announce card. New Arrivals. One of the most powerful announce cards there is. Gets 3 free soldiers and 5 food. Massive swing card. And keep in mind, if he just held on to those 2 soldiers, what was the point of buying them and sacrificing them in the same turn? On turn 2. When everyone is vying for land. If he held on to them, they could have been an army. And if he sacrificed an army, he would have gotten another resource building on that tile. So, hindsight's 20/20, right? But it's just, that turn 2 felt really strange, felt really awkward. And I think he's going to want that one back. Who knows if that impacts him, at all in the late game. But that's, I think, a decision made in turn 2 that could absolutely sway your positional standing in the late game. So those free soldiers that he gets go back to the same tile that he had a soldier on last turn. Interesting, right? And he's able to purchase that field, bringing him down to 11 and 5 there. So he buys a couple more soldiers, goes ahead and forms an army with that, and activates the second iteration of Universal Donor. Very fast use of this card. This card is already incredibly powerful. I think it would be incredibly powerful if it only had one use to it. And he's already used both uses of it. So what does he do? He puts a resource building on his mountain, bringing him down to 5 and 2 after everything is all said and done. And this is going to allow him to get 3 resource buildings on his mountain tile. Now that is a huge swing. And in all honesty, felt downright broken when he did it. Turn 3, he owns 3 tiles and has 5 resource buildings. No other nation can do that. So he didn't even play the land correctly, and yet his broken nation is able to keep him afloat. All right, Michael goes to 16 and 13, David going to 16 and 10, Justin going to 11 and 8, I believe. Earthquake, just after Blood heavily invests in those buildings, Earthquake means that every nation must immediately choose one structure to be removed from the board. I think it's a pretty obvious choice here. You've invested in resource buildings. You don't want to have to spend them again. No one is about to battle, so why don't we all just get rid of our barracks? And that is what all 3 players opt to do. And it's the correct move. It's the correct move. Blood also got a free castle on that field tile that he purchased last turn. Didn't add it till afterwards, but we did get that accounted in for his resources. Ice draws the reset card, which can be a really, really powerful card. It's just not a good card to draw in your first few turns because it requires you to have a full hand of advantage cards in order to activate it. Because reset, this card itself doesn't count as one of those 3 cards. So you have to have 3 additional advantage cards with reset in order to activate it. But when his other advantage card is the Mountain Battalion, which I don't see it having too much use here, he's already got 1 out of those 3 out of the way. General continuing to move into the middle of the map. Ice sitting at 11 and 8. The Iceberg is moving 2 tiles forward. He's 2 tiles away from water. So poising pretty aggressively here. Let's see if anything comes of that. Ice is going to buy the mountain, noticing that he's making a lot more food than building materials right now, so I think that's the right move. Purchases that mountain and then also puts a defensive fortification on it because the Blood General is sitting right there. And the Blood General, we haven't sacrificed that many troops yet to where the Blood can confidently take those tiles for free, right? We've sacrificed a total of 7 soldiers, which means the general is sitting at like 20 attack right now. Absolutely the most powerful beast on the board. But also notice what Justin's advantage card is. If Blood were to attack this, he would lose because Ice is going to get 3 soldiers added to that battle, so that Mountain Battalion card is actually very relevant there. Because as it stands right now, the Blood General would win on a naked tile. And I shouldn't say naked, it has a defensive fortification, but that advantage card would be hugely impactful. Justin goes ahead and moves a soldier into the market, really like that, swaps a few food for BM so that he can purchase the field, and then immediately activates his tier 1 ability that converts an own tile to a Blizzard. Blizzards now produce 2 food per turn, so it has the same economic output, but now it is a star tile that is inaccessible by any of the enemies. And this is where I think Ice will thrive in this current iteration of the game. We haven't really had the chance to test them yet, but this is incredibly powerful. Fire or Magma wouldn't care about this whatsoever because they can melt the ice, but this star tile now cannot be accessed by the Blood General. That is massive. If Ice can somehow Blizzard 3 star tiles, that is an almost guaranteed win condition with no contest from his opponents. Huge! Then he goes ahead and activates the Frigid. He's worried that, Blood could maybe sacrifice some other soldier somehow, although I don't see how he would be able to do that, and attack that mountain tile. So he go ahead and activates Frigid so that the Blood General cannot leave that market this turn. That is the only unit on the board affected by that ability right now. I don't think that was really necessary. I think he could have afforded to hold on to that because he has that Mountain Battalion advantage card. Maybe the decision he's weighing in his head is that he wants to use that Mountain Battalion as ammo for the reset card. But I think I would hold on to Frigid for later in the game. Absolutely. So Water buys both rivers with one of those soldiers he purchased last turn and still has enough to go tier 2. So we're at turn 4. Water is the only player that's gone to tier 2. Pretty massive. Gets the Summon Home advantage card, which strangely enough in a 120 card deck has been drawn in the first few turns each of the last games that Blood has been played. It is the most powerful advantage card against the Blood Nation. And Water's got it in his back pocket. Water's getting a lot of resources. I really like what he's done with his first few turns. It seems like pretty cut and dry, but every decision matters. Every decision matters. And until you play, you don't understand that. The one thing I don't like with this move here is that he was forced to move his general back, but the reason why he did it is because he has that Fertile Footing passive. So he's under no threat from other nations right now. I don't like that his general is moving from the middle of the board, but he does it because he's going to garner an extra 4 building materials this turn by putting his general on this mountain that already has a resource building on it. If he left it on this mountain, he's only getting 2 extra building materials. So are those 2 building materials worth it? I think it's totally fine now, but other nations would definitely be able to punish that move. That mountain tile is a star tile as well. That's pretty huge. Blood puts a resource building on the forest. Sitting at 6 and 8 right now because they popped tier 2. Blood popped tier 2. So they put a resource building on their forest and their field after that. Heavily involving their economy, and yet they own the least amount of tiles on the board, and yet their economy seems to be the strongest on the board. So yeah, I do think the tier 1 economic boost that Blood has should probably be monitored over these next few games. I think that might be a change that they deserve. Instead of putting a resource building on the forest, he goes ahead and puts a barracks there. The next weather event is global cooling. Ice is supercharged for the next 2 turns. Very relevant for Justin. People should look out where Ice can be aggressive. Let's see if they can take advantage of this. Ice draws the Strong Resolve Combat Advantage card, and we can see our updated resource totals up here at the top. Michael sitting at 16 and 17, the strongest economic total here for Blood. The biggest Yeet going at 16 and 13, very, very healthy. And Stanny sitting at 13 and 10. Ice aggressively positioning at that swamp, knowing that the Blood General was frozen their last turn. Purchases that swamp, builds 2 defensive fortifications on it. Ice is going to purchase a couple more building materials from the market so he can purchase that forest as well. So great utilization of that market in the early game. I think most nations could benefit from this. And that's all Ice does. So a little bit of an issue with what Justin's positioned here. Maybe it's not too much of a big deal. What I would do with this soldier right here is he's in the market. right? You make your trade. I would probably go ahead and immediately shift that soldier over to the temple, because then I can go for either of the star tiles potentially, right? I've got that combat bonus. Water just moved away from the mountain. Who's to say that they might not move into that this turn? So I could get a cheeky steal on one of them. But in addition to that, the ice tier 1 abilities are incredibly powerful. So for 5 and 5, I could get Frigid back, or I could get another Blizzard tile. And I think Justin should definitely prioritize that. So I think that was a small mistake there. And that's just that one soldier. But also I think Blood General can easily take that that swamp tile that he just took. All right, we go to Water, sitting at 16 and 13 after going to Tier 2 last turn. Has a full hand of advantage cards. We have the Just Use a Coin combat card. Very, very good. If you roll even, it's a 6. If you roll odd, it's a 1 in battle. So it's a 50-50 on being a high or a low. Better odds, right? Than, rolling a 2, 3, or 4. Just average rolls. So Justin is feeling extra confident with the swamp. So I think he actually did a little bit of math in his head, which is pretty good. Blood is currently only sitting at 7 soldiers sacrificed. And Ice has +2 added to his roll. So Ice's defense here is actually a little bit better than it normally would be. But the thing is here is that Blood can go Tier 2, make this an altar, sacrifice those soldiers, and make his general even stronger. And so this is not a confident defense here for Ice. So let's see what happens. Let's see if Blood can take advantage. Water purchases that lake on the coast, which is going to heavily contribute to that call in the Navy. Gets the swamp as well, moves that soldier from that mountain to that swamp. So now he's only 1 tile away from that iceberg. Not afraid of that iceberg right there sitting next to him. Jessica could build a barracks on the next turn and straight up attack him. So now he's got 2 soldiers on the swamp. So with these 2 lakes and the swamp owned, Water actually has +3 added onto their dice roll. So this is a pretty decent defense. But Ice has +2 added onto their dice roll with the potential of adding more soldiers. I don't know. It's a bold move. Let's see if he builds defensive fortifications here. I would definitely advise it. Builds a resource building on the lake, heavily investing in that economy. Definitely what Water does. Activates Call in the Navy and gets 14 free soldiers. So turn 5, he's got the most military on the map by a large margin. 14 soldiers coming out of there. What's also crazy, and another thing why I think Water should prioritize, going for the army win condition, the economy win condition, is if he gets someone to the Elemental Temple, he can purchase back Call in the Navy, which I think is absolutely what you should do. For only 10 and 10, I can get like another free, 2 or 3 armies. It's pretty insane. Spreads those soldiers everywhere. Sends 2 soldiers to the lake knowing that he might need to fortify that swamp again. I don't think he has any advantage cards that bring in any additional soldiers, though. So I do think this was a little bit of a weak move on David's part, not fortifying this swamp tile right here, because I do think Ice can punish this. Is that big of a deal? Maybe not. Maybe that's what he was considering. But definitely the main point of contention is over here. Ice has intentionally sandwiched himself between the Blood's General and his soldiers. What is Michael going to do? How is he going to respond against Ice encroaching into his territory? Sitting at 16 and 17, a lot of resources to play with. Strangely enough, only 2 of the star tiles have been taken. Once again, Blood should have that lake owned. He should absolutely have that lake owned, and I think that's going to bite him here. If he can't take this swamp, then that's another star tile lost to Ice. He activates Universal Receiving, so he can train a lot of soldiers at a discounted rate from his 1 barracks. Moves 1 to the lake, so now he's positioning for that lake. He goes ahead and activates Transfusion so that he can go Tier 2. He was weighing going Tier 2 last turn, but opted not to do it, so he goes Tier 2 this turn. And I think it's pretty clear-cut what he can do now, and this is what we were worried about for Ice, is that he can convert that forest to an altar, which actually has better resource production than the forest itself, so definitely the smart tile to do it on. Right? It has the resource production of a rainforest, which is pretty insane. And he can now sacrifice all of those soldiers, which is going to buff up his general. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 soldiers being sacrificed here. Sacrifices them all. Absolutely massive boost here. The general himself attacking with a massive attack value without advantage cards or without this weather buff. I think Ice, just outright loses this. So just the, small addition of 2 is going to be a huge factor here. So Michael's attack with all the soldiers sacrificed is at 33 plus dice roll. But look at what he's also done. He's invested everything into this swamp, leaving his altar naked. If Michael loses this altar tile, his strat, like he's just kaboom. He's out of this game. Checking back in the there was a little bit of debate here on how many soldiers he was sacrificing, and I think the problem wasn't in how many pieces he had on the board. It was that I was counting the pieces that he should have had on the board. I think he had extra pieces from what he should have. He should have only been able to sacrifice 9 soldiers based on the amount of soldiers he would have been able to buy. So he did the math. He had 11 pieces on the board, but he should have only had 9. So in his head, he has sacrificed 11, but he's actually only sacrificed 9 mathematically. So that was just him dragging out too many pieces, I think. It was either that or he counted too many, like, based on what he could train from his barracks. So he could have only had 9 on the board at that given time. He didn't have as much food as he thought he did. So this is a really, really close battle. If he had those 2 additional soldiers, Ice has no chance of winning without a really, really powerful advantage card. But now it's a winnable battle for Ice, but it does depend on dice rolls. Yep. He had 3 soldiers on the board and only had enough food to train 6 soldiers. Because the other caveat to that is he only had the 2 barracks, which means he could only train 3 soldiers from each of the barracks. That's where the problem was. That's where his confusion was. He thought he could train more than 3 soldiers per barracks. Ice is going to activate the Strong Resolve combat card here, which is only going to add 1 to his general. Not a very good use of this card, but he might need it. So the Strong Resolve advantage card comes out here. Blood rolls a 3. His dice roll's not that important here. It's Ice's dice roll that is more important. Ice wins by 1. If that weather event wasn't in play, if he doesn't activate this advantage card, it is not a win for Ice. That's crazy. So now what does Ice do? Blood only owns 1, 2, 3, 4 tiles outside of his capital. And Ice can take this altar, or he can take this other star tile right here. Ice has got options. Does he go for the potential of, trying to take Blood out of this game? Michael's still arguing the fact on whether or not he could have had 11 soldiers out there. The answer is he couldn't have. He could have only had 9 soldiers out there. He had 3 out there from the beginning, and he could only train 6 soldiers, right? So he should have only had 9 out there. So he's frustrated by that, but it was played correctly. And wow, that's the end of turn 5, and that was a big gamble by Blood right there. I know where his head was at. If he had those 2 additional soldiers, he does outright win that. And he could have won as well. If he rolled 2 higher on his dice roll, he would have won that. So there's a 33% chance of him winning there. Pretty crazy economy at the end of turn 5. We've got 19 and 12 for Justin, 39 and 14 for Water, and 17 and 14 for Blood. So Water being left to his own devices out here, the most military and by far the most economy. But Ice, with the potential for a killing blow in the next couple of turns, I don't know. Blood's general is a pretty good defender there. What are we going to do with turn 6? Ladies and gentlemen, check it out on the next video. Who you got right now? Who is in the lead? Love ya.